Doctor Who is back, and obviously a key part of any TV show is its opening episode to its series or season. It's arguably the most important episode. It'll determine whether audiences will stick around for the remaining episodes. It establishes character and plot, potentially for a series arc or the format of the show, or both, as well as developing and executing its own isolated story. Doctor Who has had some really memorable opening episodes, and by the time Series 6 rolled around, it was still going full steam ahead at this point. I mean, Series 5 was received very well. Matt Smith was loved by the entire fan base. You know, you've also just reset the universe in the last episode, so what do you do now? You've got to come back in some big way, and that they absolutely did.
We are not fighting an alien invasion. We're leading a revolution.
I'm sorry.
The Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon kicked off Doctor Who's most ambitious mission since being revived, and that is breaking into America. The episode starts with Amy, Rory and River receiving TARDIS blue envelopes turning out to be invitations, which all read "like this video and subscribe to this YouTube channel."
So what's next? Fellatio?
As well as a date and coordinates telling them where to go. At the same time, we're seeing the Doctor getting up to all these just weird antics across all different time zones and locations, reaching out from the past, being intentionally very loud to kind of grab Amy and Rory's attentions, showing up in books and TV shows and news articles, drawing major attention to himself. It succeeds in immediately making a grand scale feel to the episode and the story, and it also executes its manic energy incredibly well. When they reunite with the Doctor, he's embracing his American side, rocking a Stetzer, which frankly I think rules with Eleven's outfit, but River makes an entrance shooting it off, and they all sit in the diner. We establish where everyone is after the entire universe rebooted. The opening draws so much to that year and to America as a country, and I mean, in 1969, the year of the moon landing, the first step on the moon, huge, iconic, changed everything. So with that setting, it's like a great backdrop to the plot. So they picnic on the beach, and it's some truly stunning cinematography. The colours are bright, it feels hot. Amy pushes the Doctor for answers about what's going on. Why has he been so loud? What are the invitations about? And he kind of refuses to engage. And looking at this scene now with hindsight, it's so interesting because the Doctor is setting the seeds to allow everything to unfold, kicking off this paradoxical series with this first domino that he is pushing over. So then we see the astronaut emerging from the lake, and it's just a strangely uncanny visual, with the moon appearing above them as well and the astronaut appearing from the opposite depths. It feels like such a contradictory and sci-fi visual that only Doctor Who could pull off. And considering the opening to this episode and just kind of the general build-up that we've been getting and not knowing what to, there is an impending sense of doom due to the information that it simply refuses to give us. I mean, we even lose music. We see everything happen at a distance as well. Even when the actual moment happens, we see it from far away, puts us in a helpless position. It's pretty clear that the Doctor is aware of what's about to happen, especially when he starts talking to the astronaut, and he tells the others not to interfere with total seriousness. So the tension builds because the Doctor knows all, and we know nothing. So our kind of usual base instinct on the show is to just trust the lead character, only to have that trust kind of broken very quickly. River holds Amy back, knowing the consequence of interfering with time as the Doctor is shot. He starts to regenerate. He sincerely apologizes as he accepts his fate, and then he's shot a second time, sending a shockwave through the lake and the audience as he falls to the floor after being killed mid-regeneration, therefore permanently. Opening your next series with the death of the title character and with the nature of how it's handled, it is so ballsy, and I love it because it does feel final. We get a beautiful score from Murray Gold, as well as some beautiful shots to accompany it. The boat in flames over the lake. It looks incredible, and it is just filled to the brim with pure emotion. We just have to sit with it, unsure of what's next. As they return to the diner, River and Rory are keen to understand what's going on. Why did the Doctor know this was going to happen? Why did he invite them all? And who had the final envelope? But Amy can't motivate herself to care. He's gone. Her best friend is dead. Life will never be the same. Her defeat is incredibly effective, and that's when the Doctor walks out alive and well. So now we can kind of backtrack a little bit. The whole lead up to the shooting is stellar. We go through everything, the mystery, the tension, the sincerity, and the grand event. It all works to perfection to be able to pull off something that makes you question if the lead and title character of your show is dead in episode 1. It's an insanely impressive feat, and it's so well paced. Now, whilst we don't see the universal effects of this event, which is a shame, I think that is a missed opportunity later on, we absolutely feel the emotional impact here more than ever. And especially considering by the end of the series, we realised that these are actually the Doctor's family. The biggest issue is the resolution. You know, I don't want to talk about it too much, but it is the case. Because it's so serialized, you have to kind of take that into account, I think. Because this whole series spends all this time saying how the Doctor has to die, it's inevitable, there's no avoiding it. And then it is just like a clone, like a droid, which Amy even says in this first episode, like,
maybe he's a clone or a duplicate or something.
It was right there, we should have known. As much as the payoff's not great, the setup is. And I think that gets lost sometimes. And I think something that does mostly have the payoff is River's setup. She obviously is later on revealed to be the astronaut, and then also to be Amy and Rory's daughter, as well as clone Amy or Ganger Amy, whatever those freaky milk boys are called. This is a very nerdy nitpick and completely irrelevant, but obviously the Doctor starts regenerating. So first of all, can the Tesselector do that? Like, they could just add CGI on top of whoever they're copying. Alright, but also he shouldn't have been able to, because this is his last incarnation. I know at the time of doing this, it was before John Hurt was coming in for the 50th, so they still thought they had one more cycle, but I always just think of that when I rewatch these episodes now. So River makes it very apparent that it is fucked up for the Doctor to do this to them. He obviously knew what was going to happen, but now his younger self doesn't know. Everyone here knows that this dude is going to die. We're leading there, and we can't avoid it, but he doesn't know, and his family can't tell him because of the awful, insane, paradoxical effects that it would have. It's a really interesting dilemma, also because they're all out of sync as well, just in terms of time frame. And admittedly, I'm a bit biased, I think, to these two episodes, because they were the first I ever saw of the show. That's why I got hooked. I always knew of Doctor Who, but I never really watched it, and coming downstairs, the first thing to see is the Doctor die. Of course I was hooked, I had to see how that played out. The amount of times that Moffat then proceeds to use the death of the Doctor as a plotline is kind of annoying, but I think this is the best shot at it. Now, as much as this is a serialized series especially, these first two episodes do a great job at keeping themselves relatively contained. When it comes to the plot involving the moon landing and the silence, it's the questions we are left with after part 2 that don't all have the most satisfying conclusions later in the series, but everything set up to be finished in these two episodes, I think, is very satisfying. The episode has a constant feeling of doom due to the nature of the plot and how we are out of sync with the lead character. And this is all only amplified when the Doctor himself is catching on to something being wrong. They all tell him that they've got to go to 1969 and meet this Canton, but won't tell him why or who the invitations are from. And so the Doctor is hesitant. He at first refuses to go, saying a mysterious individual summons them and they're just going to go head first, no questions. Of course, Smith is quite a childlike Doctor at times, but his older Time Lord self does pop out, and he always switches it on and off so well. It's so impressive. He's a brilliant actor, and I think this series holds his best performances as well as his best look. The fact that the three are stuck and their hands are really tied and can't tell the Doctor the truth about why they've got to do this and what they know causes a lot of concern and creates some really unique tension amongst the TARDIS team. It's only when the Doctor is convinced by Amy talking about fish fingers and custard, knowing that's his best friend, okay, he just needs to have a little faith this time. Oh look, it's James Gunn's friend. Canton gets taken to see President Nixon, a very remembered president. I get that Doctor Who has a thing of looking at historical, controversial figures with rose-tinted glasses, but I don't hate it. It's never really the focus, and I think if it wanted to kind of deep dive into some of those figures, it would be a welcome addition, but I also don't hate that it never does, and you get hints to it as well, I think. I know it's a similar kind of argument with Churchill in Victory of the Daleks. I do think it's pretty great though, and hilarious how it basically implies that a lot of political decisions are so silly that it would make more sense if mind-controlling aliens were the ones doing it without anyone knowing. A worrying amount of people don't know that most things are political, let alone Doctor Who. The tape Nixon shows Canton is actually really creepy, and we've got that previously established sense of doom that is still lingering, but we're also now branching into a bit of horror, which comes into play more in the next episode for me. But you have it set up here, and it's a tone that I think is really unique and really effective at executing. I think the Silents are a legitimately scary villain, and there are parts of these episodes that really build that up, tying them to the Doctor's death as well in some way that we are yet to find out. I think the scene where the Doctor comes into the Oval Office is great. It shows Matt Smith's comedic chops. He commits quite a bit to some goofy ass moments here, but it's fun, and they manage to gain their time without being shot to find out where this girl on the tape is and why or how she's in danger. And this is where we get an example of the Silence's power, which is what makes them so unique. I mean, they look brilliant as well, don't get me wrong, but as soon as you look away, you forget them entirely. You cannot remember them. What a brilliant concept for a creature. So the Doctor figures out that the girl wasn't reading out her name, but road signs. And that's a great pivot in a plot, a really subtle subversion of expectations that you don't even think about much after, but it does subconsciously, I think, have an effect. And they find themselves at this seemingly abandoned warehouse that has a mix of alien technology from presumably the future, along with stolen NASA equipment from the space program, which begs the big question as to why. If you've got that tech, why do you want this older revolutionary tech but not as quality? They find this series of underground tunnels, and it's really creepy. The way the Silents behave, like almost a hive of beings, the way they sleep, and the slimy nature of them, it's all very gross, but in a very good way. As River discusses her and the Doctor's relationship, there is a true tragedy to it, and as mentioned before, I like it, and as much as I don't always love the approach Moffat takes to Smith and Kingston's version of that relationship, in hindsight with her last episode, retroactively makes this all much better, but it is sad knowing that their final days with each other are gonna be in opposite directions. It's a real doomed relationship. They both will know when it's their last day, but the other won't. So the episode ends with Amy confessing that she's pregnant. Whilst the astronaut reappears as Rory and River discover the tunnels had been underground for centuries, running across the whole planet, Amy instinctively goes to shoot the astronaut, just a gut reaction to save the Doctor. But it's revealed that the child is in this suit, asking for help. When you think about this as well, it's actually Amy shooting her own daughter, which maybe explains a lot of who she grows up to be.
Oh, well, fat lot of use that is, you big ginge.
Kicking off the second half of this story, there's been a clear time jump. Everyone's on the run, and the Doctor is being kept in Area 51, which is a lot of fun, and he's rocking a badass beard, quite frankly. We see through flashbacks that the Silents launched an attack on everyone at the warehouse, but they just about escaped, but the little girl in the astronaut suit was left behind, thankfully unharmed. As Canton hunts everyone down, we realise after that it was all part of the plan. He wasn't hunting them down to actually kill them, he was hunting them down so he could take them back into this secure cell that the Doctor was being kept in. Very sci-fi, high-tech. Once they're in there, unlock the door. No one can physically open it from the outside, and they also can't be heard. So once they're in there, they can get on with their plan without interruption. The TARDIS is cloaked in there, so no one was questioning that, so they go and pick up River and get going. Truthfully, this opening feels kind of unnecessary, and I think a kind of pattern in Moffat's writing can sometimes be he'll think of something cool and do it without much genuine reason in the wider plan for things, because what Canton is just pretending to hunt them down over this big time jump, I guess, while they build the cell, but at the same time it just feels wildly dragged out. After the previous episode breaks expectations, this episode does a great job at really kind of bringing everything together and leaving the perfect amount left up for debate and mystery to go along the series arc. We spend a bit of time kind of learning about the Silents as well and how they work. They don't actually know they're called the Silents yet, because that is a point of note later on. But obviously, considering they don't know what they look like because they can't remember, they're having to come up with inventive ways to tackle a threat. I love the way that it puts us directly in Canton's shoes when showing how you just don't remember. But also, you can still remember things that have been said, meaning that the silence can implant ideas that you then, when you look away, don't know how that idea got there, but the idea is still there. We get that example through the Doctor implanting an idea in Canton's head.
Keep eye contact with the creature, and when I say turn back, and when you do, straighten my bow tie.
Brilliantly worked into the scene, edited so we don't see the silence until after the fact and the Doctor's explaining it for the final time. And it's really actually quite scary. I mean, to have ideas and you don't know where they've come from, or what the purpose even is, as well as not being able to remember this horrific thing that is affecting you. Fucking scary, mate. Amy and Canton go to an orphanage to find more about this little girl. It's brilliant. It's some great creepy Doctor Who horror. Phenomenal atmosphere, and seeing the insanely long-term effects of the silence on this man running the orphanage, literally living in the past, not realizing the orphanage is abandoned and closed, whilst the Doctor is tampering with Apollo 11. A key thing found here is that one room still seems to be used, homing a child, and there's a photo framed with Amy holding a baby. After only just learning that she's pregnant, how could that photo possibly exist? I love the usage of time and making things sinister through the fact that they don't happen chronologically. With hindsight, if I remember correctly, Kavarian was keeping the little girl, or River as we eventually find out, preparing her for the execution of the Doctor. Now, my biggest issue across both episodes, by a decent mile, the forced kind of issues between Amy and Rory. It doesn't feel natural, it feels unnecessary, and it adds absolutely nothing. It leads to a great conversation between the Doctor and Rory, but that's not enough, you know, to have that whole plot. And the same again happens when we get to Asylum of the Daleks. It just feels like a totally unnecessary, forced narrative. I get Rory is insecure about the Doctor, but that felt very much covered and done in Series 5. So finally, we get the reveal that these creatures are called the Silence.
Silence, Doctor.
We ran from the silence.
Silence.
This widens the scale even further. I mean, these two episodes have done a great job at making it feel so grand, but you implement this, something that was from the start of Smith's tenure, as well as such an incredible concept for stories, and it's a shame this is the only time we really see it like this. Creatures who can influence, as they say in this episode, parasites, but super parasites. They never do any of the work, but they make other species do it. They could have influenced any number of huge events on this planet for years. Why do we think that humans suddenly decided to go to the moon? Because the Silence needed to. Because they needed the spacesuit. It's great at political and tense storytelling, a great conduit for such ideas, but this is the only time we really get it, and I kind of understand that, because once you show it, it's kind of hard to revisit something like this. But I think if Series 6 had gone differently, they definitely could have. There would have been interesting ways around it, or even to spread it out further across the series to show them having more influence in things that are going on, because whilst they're incredible in these two episodes, in the grand scale of the show, they become more just bullet sponges when they could have been as iconic as the Weeping Angels or the Daleks. During this time before the Doctor showed up, they took Amy and have been keeping her in that weird console room that was actually from the lodger that does get explained, which it never needed to, but it's a nice kind of bit of universe building, I think, and again, the feeling that they were always around somehow. So they find their way back to Amy through the tunnels back to that console room. And I love the Doctor's approach to the Silence in this sequence. Smith is brilliantly comedic and commanding. He strolls in with total 100% confidence, unwavering. Turns out the Doctor was interfering with the moon landing broadcast. This is the one time everyone globally was looking at the same thing, you know. The huge event that was the moon landing. Everyone had their eyes on it. Of course they did. You would. And that's why it was also the perfect time for the Silence to once again interfere. But that also means, on the other side of that coin, that it's the perfect time to let everyone know. Using footage from Amy's phone, which they obviously wouldn't expect with it being 1969. Instead of Neil Armstrong's foot, they broadcast the cocky silence claiming that they should be killed on sight. And in that moment, the globe united, all simultaneously. Remember that they've seen these creatures somewhere or other, many of them being in the same room at the same time. And so with that, the silence order their own execution. That leads us directly into a high-octane, fast-paced action sequence, and it is a lot of fun. Lasers flying everywhere, Murray Gold's theme blasting as the Doctor and River take out the silence whilst Rory saves Amy. It's just a lot of fun, and a deserved big climactic ending to two big climactic episodes. It feels like a finale, but it's the first. This is how you're dropping the series. It also feels like a bit of a way to showcase the budget increase. Ending on a weirder note though, in that Amy then says she's not pregnant. She thought she was, but she's not. But on the scanner, in the TARDIS, it can't decipher if she is or isn't, which again is another kind of seed for the reveal that this isn't the real Amy. They're great. I think the mysteries that it sets up are intertwined with the actual story that concludes in these two episodes. They go so well together, and it's a shame of how some of them are paid off later on, but nonetheless, I think this is a brilliant way to open a series, because it's bold, it's risky, but I think it works. Surprisingly, despite the nature of this series of Doctor Who, the opening two episodes set up the series arc incredibly effectively, whilst also containing this certain part of the story, and I think that is what makes it work. It doesn't retroactively ruin my enjoyment of these two episodes, because the focus does feel more on the emotional weight that the Doctor's death brings, and then it kind of obviously evolves more into a more typical Doctor Who story with these incredible antagonists and plotline spiraling across time and involving the moon landing. I think they're massive, I think they're emotional, I think they're funny, intense. It comes in bigger and bolder than any other series opener, and I think that's absolutely to its benefit and why it is potentially my favourite.
Will I be remembered?
Oh, Dickie. Tricky Dickie. They're never going to forget you.